Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is simple. Cut through the noise, pull together the key research, and get you genuinely informed and fast. Today, we are definitely wading into the deep end of American politics. We're looking at this high-stakes, really cross-country political arms race.
And it's centered on, well, one of the oldest tricks in the book, isn't it? Drawing maps to lock in power.
Exactly. Gerrymandering. So we're going to try and understand the scope, the implications of this fight using, a stack of curated sources.
And what we're seeing, it's way beyond just local squabbles. This is like a nationally coordinated thing now, an escalation.
Both sides really going all in on redrawing boundaries, turning this old tactic into something very modern, very data-driven.
A weapon, essentially.
Yeah. And the implications, well, they're pretty profound. We'll trace how this fight is escalating, look at some surprising numbers on just how distorted things can get.
And maybe the most interesting part, the irony, really, of these political reform efforts just getting tossed aside when partisan advantage is suddenly up for grabs.
Okay, but maybe first things first. That word gerrymandering, it sounds so odd. We should probably start there, right?
Yeah.
Where did it actually come from?
Absolutely. You almost have to know the origin story. It takes us back, way back, actually, 212 years. 1812, Massachusetts.
Okay.
The Gerry part is Governor Elbridge Gerry. He signed this bill, right? And it created a state Senate district up in Essex County that was just bizarrely shaped.
That's visually strange.
Oh, totally. Long, thin, winding all over the place. So much so that a political cartoonist at the time drew it with wings and claws, like some kind of monster.
But not a dragon, apparently. A salamander.
Exactly, a salamander. So the newspaper editor supposedly combined Gerry with salamander and boom, Gerrymander. But the intent, it wasn't funny at all. It was deadly serious politics, that weird shape. It worked. It kept Gerry's party, the Democratic Republicans, in power, even though they weren't that popular.
A successful trick then, and maybe even more powerful now.
For sure. That longevity is kind of unnerving when you think about it. A 200-year-old tactic boosted by modern computing data. It's being used more ruthlessly than ever.
And the sources seem to point to one specific moment, one state, that really catalyzed this current, let's call it, national acceleration.
Yeah, they do. Texas. You have to look at Texas. While, gerrymandering happens everywhere, Texas Republicans kind of fired the starting gun on this latest round.
When was this?
Last June. They announced, then pretty quickly pushed through, a plan to redraw the congressional districts.
And they weren't exactly shy about why, were they?
Not at all. The goal was explicit. Maximize the GOP advantage. They aimed to flip potentially up to 5 seats held by Democrats in the House.
5 seats. That's significant.
It is. And
Yeah.
that move, so public, so aggressive, in such a key state, it basically signaled that any pretense of playing nice with maps was over. Nationally?
Right. And politics hates a vacuum. So the blue states didn't just sit back, did they?
No way. The response was tactical and pretty quick. This isn't just one party's game anymore. It's become a nationwide back and forth.
Like political hot potato with district lines.
Kinda, yeah. It's pure tit for tat. So on the Republican side, you've got Texas, obviously, but then efforts in Missouri targeting Emanuel Cleaver's district, North Carolina trying to flip one blue seat, Florida, Louisiana, Kansas, they're all in the mix. And Ohio, they have to redraw their maps anyway, and that's expected to give the Republicans, maybe a 1 to 3 seat bump.
Yeah.
Pretty much guaranteed.
Okay, so the red side is clearly active.
Yeah.
How are Democrats pushing back against this potential shift in the national balance?
They're mobilizing, too, using their own institutional levers. In Virginia, Democrats are looking seriously at amending the state constitution.
To do what?
To allow for new redistricting, the goal. Potentially netting 2 or 3 House seats, flipping them from red to blue.
Okay.
But maybe the biggest countermove we're seeing is brewing in California.
California. What's happening there?
Right.
Because the way they're trying to do it sounds, well, pretty aggressive itself.
It is. Voters there seem like they're about to pass a referendum, and this referendum would allow something called mid-decade redistricting.
Which isn't the norm, right? Usually it's just once after the census.
Exactly. Normally, you wait for the 10-year cycle. This would let them redraw the congressional maps now. And the potential prize. Flipping maybe 5 or 6 Republican-held seats, it's a direct response.
Okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting and kind of ironic, because you mentioned Texas driving this with an aggressive legislative move.
Right.
But the response in places like California and Virginia, it involves them basically ditching their own earlier reforms, doesn't it?
Precisely. The sources really hammer this point home. The irony is huge. Think about California back in 2008, 2010. They were leaders in this stuff. They created an independent redistricting commission. Voters loved it.
And Virginia, too, right? They just approved a nonpartisan commission in 2020.
Just now, yeah. And both of those were pushed hard by Democrats as, good government reforms, essential stuff.
But
now, facing the Texas play, Democrats in those same states are trying to scrap or sidestep those very initiatives.
So good government takes a back seat to partisan advantage.
It looks that way. They're choosing to join the arms race, essentially arguing it's self-defense, even if it means undermining those democratic process reforms they championed.
And the big risk here, as you touched on, is we end up with these super red states and super blue states just driving the country further apart.
That's the danger. It creates this destructive feedback loop. If you guarantee, say, 0 Republican representatives from Massachusetts or 0 Democrats from, Wyoming, you silence huge chunks of the population in those states.
Which just encourages more extreme policies from the party in power there.
Exactly, and widens that gap, that sort of psychological divide between red and blue America.
This feeling of exhaustion with the constant partisan warfare. It's captured pretty well by Arnold Schwarzenegger, actually. He weighed in on this.
Yeah, the former governor. He basically said, look, stop pointing fingers. Yeah. This extreme gerrymandering, it's happening everywhere.
And he had some stats to back that up, didn't he? Really stark numbers.
Staggering numbers, yeah. He used them to argue that parties are just wasting energy on these map fights instead of actually governing.
Let's focus on those numbers for a second, because they really show the result of all this map manipulation. What did he point out?
Okay, look at Massachusetts again. He points out 40% of the voters there are Republican or voted for Trump. 40%.
Okay.
How many Republican representatives does Massachusetts send to the U.S. House?
Let me guess. 0.
0. None. And then New Mexico, 45% Republican voters, same story. 0 Republican members of Congress.
That's not accidental, is it? That's engineered.
That's the definition of engineered outcomes through gerrymandering. It's not just weird lines, it's strategic distortion. You're seeing those two main techniques at play.
Right, the packing and cracking.
Exactly. You either pack as many of the other party's voters into one district as you can. You give them that one seat, sure, but they can't win anywhere else.
Oh, you crack them.
Or you crack them, spread their voters thinly across many districts so they never form a majority anywhere. The result, as Schwarzenegger highlights, is 0 representation for a huge part of the population.
Which, going back to his point, makes actual performance almost irrelevant, right? He said something like, what does 5 seats matter in Texas anyway? It's crazy.
Yeah, his argument is that this obsessive focus on tiny seat advantages is just a distraction from, actually doing the job of governing effectively.
And this whole arms race, this feeling that anything goes now. We have to connect it back to the courts, don't we? There was a key moment there.
Absolutely. This sense of impunity got a huge green light from the judiciary back in 2019, the Supreme Court decision.
Right. What did they say exactly?
Well, it was kind of a mixed message. They said, yes, partisan gerrymandering is, quote, incompatible with democratic principles. Pretty strong statement. Yeah. But they immediately followed up by saying it's not something federal courts can fix. It's a political question, basically.
So they acknowledged the problem, but washed their hands of it.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
By stepping back, they essentially pushed the fight down to the state level, making it a purely partisan battle fought in state legislatures and state courts. It absolutely accelerated the crisis we're seeing now.
Okay, and that legal landscape brings us neatly to one of the most high-profile counterattacks happening right now in New York.
Right. New York has jumped into the fray big time. There's a specific lawsuit filed in the state Supreme Court in Manhattan.
Filed by?
The Elias Law Group, which is, a major Democratic law firm specializing in exactly this kind of voting rights and redistricting litigation. They're representing 4 New Yorkers.
And the target is very specific, very strategic.
Extremely. It's New York's 11th congressional district, CD11, that covers all of Staten Island and a slice of southern Brooklyn.
Why is that district so important?
Because it's currently held by Republican Nicole Malliotakis, and she is the only Republican member of Congress from New York City. Taking her out would be a big symbolic and practical win for Democrats.
So what's the legal argument? Are they just saying it's an unfair partisan map?
Not explicitly. The core claim is actually rooted in civil rights. The lawsuit argues the current map unconstitutionally dilutes the votes of Black and Latino residents.
Ah, okay, so violating the state constitution and the New York Voting Rights Act.
Precisely. They're alleging racial vote dilution.
Is there demographic evidence to back that claim up?
Well, the suit points to pretty significant population shifts. Over the last 40 years, the combined Black and Latino population on Staten Island has shot up from about 11% to roughly 30% now.
That's a big jump.
It is. And the argument is that the current district lines effectively pack these growing minority communities into a district where their votes don't translate into real influence because they're outweighed by other voting blocks.
So the solution they're asking the court for is?
They want the court to order a redraw to create what's called a minority influence district.
Meaning a district where those groups can have a decisive impact.
Essentially, yes. A district where the Black and Latino population is large enough and, crucially, geographically compact enough to significantly influence who gets elected. The specific proposal mentioned is pairing parts of Staten Island with communities in Lower Manhattan.
Okay. Now, we need to be fair here. What's the pushback? What are the counterarguments against this lawsuit?
Oh, the pushback is strong. Representative Malliotakis herself called the suit frivolous. She labeled it a terrible abuse of the legal process by what she called an ultra-partisan Washington law firm doing the national party's bidding.
And she pointed out some irony too, didn't she? About who drew the current lines.
She did. She noted that the lines currently being challenged were actually put in place by Democrats and the state's independent commission, following an earlier court order. So she's saying, you're challenging lines your side basically approved.
And the state GOP.
The New York State Republican chair, Ed Cox, went even further. He called the lawsuit itself a blatant racial gerrymander.
Whoa, okay. Flipping the script.
Exactly. He argued it violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and called it a naked attempt to disenfranchise voters, basically saying they're using race cynically to achieve a partisan goal.
So it's a really contentious legal battle, which raises a question. Why a lawsuit? Why not just get the state legislature to draw new maps like they did in Texas?
Well, that goes back to those earlier reforms we talked about. New York has an independent commission now.
Right.
And under the New York Constitution, changing congressional maps mid-decade normally requires this whole lengthy constitutional amendment process. It's slow. It will probably push any changes way past 2026, maybe even to 2028.
But a lawsuit is faster.
Potentially, yes. A lawsuit gives them a path to get a judge to declare the current map invalid now, based on that constitutional claim of vote dilution.
And then the court could order a new map drawn.
Right. Either by the judge or a court-appointed special master. It effectively bypasses the legislature and that amendment requirement. It's seen as a legal shortcut to potentially get a map more favorable to Democrats in time for the 2026 midterms. It's driven, really, by this national fight.
Okay, let's step back and try to synthesize this for the listener. We've got this massive, nationwide map drawing frenzy. Texas, California, New York, Virginia, Missouri. Both parties are playing hardball.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway? Even if the total number of House seats flip nationally kind of cancels out, what's the real impact?
That's the crucial point. Even if the national numbers look like a wash, the local impact within states is huge and, frankly, pretty damaging.
How so?
By systematically drawing maps to eliminate any real competition, you guarantee deeper polarization within each state. You end up with states where the minority party has virtually no voice at the federal level.
Like those Massachusetts and New Mexico examples.
Exactly. And that means the party in power faces less pressure to moderate. Policy gets pushed further to the extremes, further left in solid blue states, further right in solid red ones. We're essentially trading competitive districts, where politicians might have to appeal to the middle for these safe, predictable, polarized fiefdoms.
Okay, so this escalating fight, where even past reforms are being tossed aside for partisan gain, it leads to a really interesting, maybe disturbing final thought about what comes next. If Democrats fully embrace aggressive, partisan gerrymandering, now in states where they have power, learning from the GOP playbook. What does that signal for the next big redistricting cycle after the 2030 census?
This is potentially the ultimate unintended consequence of the current Republican strategy. By pushing the envelope so hard now, they might be ensuring that in 2030, the Democrats, having decided that fairness is off the table, just decide to go nuclear.
Go nuclear meaning?
meaning they completely abandon any pretense of nonpartisanship in the 2030 cycle. They use every bit of power they have in state legislatures across the country to draw maps purely for maximum democratic advantage.
Which could potentially wipe out all the gains the GOP is making right now.
It could. That round of map drawing in 2030 could theoretically offset everything happening now in Texas, North Carolina, Ohio, and elsewhere. It would just reset the whole battle, possibly even more aggressively.
So the provocative question for all of us listening is, by fighting so hard for these temporary, maybe short-term seat advantages today, have both parties actually locked us into a future of even more extreme political instability and deeper polarization for the entire next decade?
That's the unsettling question, isn't it? Are we just guaranteeing this pendulum swings harder and harder?
A really sobering thought to end on as this political earthquake keeps reshaping the map. Thank you for helping us navigate all this complexity, from 1812 salamanders to 21st century lawsuits.
My pleasure. It's a critical story to follow.
Indeed.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.